Hold on a second. Elliotte Friedman just casually dropped that the Nashville Predators might be willing to trade Filip Forsberg, and the Toronto Maple Leafs could be interested, because apparently Brad Treliving thinks the solution to losing Mitch Marner is to go out and get another superstar winger, and honestly, this could be the most Brad Treliving move we've ever seen. All right, folks, we need to talk about what might be the biggest bombshell rumor of the early season. Elliotte Friedman, the most connected insider in hockey, the guy who breaks 90% of the major trades before they happen, just linked the Toronto Maple Leafs to Nashville Predators superstar Filip Forsberg. And this isn't some throwaway speculation buried in a tweet. This came during a recent episode of his 32 Thoughts podcast, where Friedman specifically said he's heard rumblings that Nashville might want to move Forsberg, and he's wondering if Brad Treliving and the Leafs will take a serious look. Let me tell you right now, this would be an absolutely franchise-altering move, and we need to break down every angle of why this makes sense, why it's terrifying, and what it would take to actually pull off. Let's start with what Friedman actually said, because context matters. Here's the exact quote. "One name to keep an eye on is Filip Forsberg. I've heard Nashville may want to trade him. I'm not saying this, but I wonder if Treliving and the Leafs will look at this." Now, Friedman is being careful with his language here. He's not reporting that a trade is imminent or that formal discussions have taken place. He's saying he's heard Nashville might be open to moving Forsberg, and he's speculating, based on his knowledge of Brad Treliving's tendencies and Toronto's needs, that the Leafs could be a logical fit. But here's the thing about Elliotte Friedman. He doesn't just throw names out randomly for clicks. When he mentions a specific player and a specific team in the same breath, there's usually smoke behind that fire. He's connected to front offices across the league. He hears things. And when he says he wonders if Treliving will look at this, what he's really saying is, I think there's a real possibility this happens, and you should pay attention. So let's talk about Filip Forsberg. This guy is an absolute stud, one of the most underrated superstars in the NHL. He's 31 years old, which means he's still in his prime years with plenty of high-level hockey left. He was drafted 11th overall back in 2012, and over 780 career games, he's put up 681 points, 318 goals, and 363 assists. That's elite production over a long period of time. He's hit 40 goals twice in his career. He's a two-way force who finished in the top 10 for Zelka Trophy voting, and he brings legitimate superstar caliber to both ends of the ice. Now here's what makes Forsberg so intriguing for Toronto specifically. He would fill the exact void left by Mitch Marner's departure. The Leafs lost Marner to free agency this past summer, and while they try to compensate through other moves, there's no replacing that level of offensive production easily. Marner was a point-per-game player who drove offense from the wing, created for his line mates, and was one of the most dynamic playmakers in the league. Forsberg isn't an identical replacement. Nobody is. But he brings similar offensive firepower with a slightly different skill set. Where Forsberg actually has advantages over Marner is in his physicality and his goal scoring. The report mentions that Forsberg loves to throw hits, which immediately makes him more aligned with Craig Berube's coaching style. Berube wants a team that plays hard, finishes checks, and wins battles along the boards. Marner was never really a physical player. That wasn't his game. But Forsberg? He's recorded 1,133 hits over his career. He plays with an edge. He's willing to go into dirty areas. That's the kind of identity Berube is trying to build in Toronto. And let's talk about the playoff production, because that's always been the elephant in the room with the Maple Leafs. Forsberg has 59 points in 81 career playoff games, 31 goals and 28 assists. That's solid, consistent production on hockey's biggest stage. He's been through long playoff runs with Nashville. He's experienced the pressure, and he's delivered. If one of Toronto's concerns is playoff performance, and let's be honest, it always is, then acquiring a player with Forsberg's playoff resume addresses that directly. The defensive side of Forsberg's game is another massive selling point. As mentioned, he was a Zelka Trophy finalist, finishing in the top 10 for best defensive forward. That's not just about blocking shots or backchecking. That's elite two-way hockey. He's smart positionally. He disrupts opposing offenses, and he can be trusted in all situations. Craig Berube loves players who can play a complete game, and Forsberg absolutely fits that mold. So on paper, This makes perfect sense for Toronto. They need a top-6 winger with star power. They need someone who can produce offensively while also playing the hard, physical style that Berube demands. They need playoff experience and proven production. Filip Forsberg checks every single box. The fit is almost too perfect. But, and this is a massive but, acquiring Forsberg will be extraordinarily difficult and expensive. Let's talk about the obstacles. First, there's a salary cap. Forsberg is making $8.5 million per season through 2027 to 2028. That's a hefty cap hit. And Toronto is already navigating tight cap space. To absorb that contract, they need to move significant money out. That likely means trading one or more roster players just to make the money work. It's not impossible, but it requires careful maneuvering and potentially sacrificing depth elsewhere. Second, there's the acquisition cost in terms of assets. Nashville isn't going to just give away a franchise player for nothing. If they're actually willing to trade Forsberg, and remember, that's still a big if, they'll want a massive return. The report specifically mentions that Toronto might need to include prospects like Ben Danford or Auston Cowan. Those are two of the Leafs' most valuable young assets. Ben Danford was Toronto's first-round pick in 2024, a big right-shot defenseman with significant upside. Auston Cowan is an even more precious asset, a first-round pick who's been tearing up the OHL and is considered one of the Leafs' best prospects in years. Trading either of them will be painful. Trading both would be gutting the prospect pool. And it's not just prospects. Nashville would certainly want high draft picks included, probably at least one first-rounder, maybe more. So you're looking at a package that includes something like Auston Cowan, Ben Danford, a 2026 first-round pick, and potentially more. That a franchise-altering haul to give up, even for a player of Forsberg's caliber. This brings us to the fundamental question that Brad Treliving has to answer. Are the Toronto Maple Leafs in win-now mode, where they're willing to mortgage the future for a legitimate shot at the Stanley Cup right now? Or are they trying to balance competing today with maintaining long-term sustainability? The argument for going all in is straightforward. Auston Matthews is in his prime. William Nylander is playing at an elite level. John Tavares still has high-level hockey left. The goaltending situation is solid with Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. The defense is better than it's been in years. This team is good, and they're positioned to compete for a championship. If you can add Filip Forsberg to that core, you're legitimately one of the scariest teams in the Eastern Conference. Craig Berube's system is also a factor. He's implemented a more structured, defensively responsible style that emphasizes physicality and playing hard in all three zones. Forsberg fits that system perfectly. He's exactly the type of player Berube would love to coach. Skilled enough to produce offense, tough enough to battle through adversity, and smart enough to play within the structure. Adding him could be the final piece that makes Berube's vision fully functional. The counterargument is the risk. You're trading away top prospects and draft picks, the lifeblood of any franchise, for a 31-year-old player with 4 years left on his contract. What if he gets injured? What if his production declines due to age? What if the chemistry doesn't work in Toronto? What if you still don't win the cup despite making this massive investment? Then you've gutted your prospect pool, sacrificed your future, and have nothing to show for it. There's also the philosophical question of whether this is how championship teams are built. Do you win cups by making blockbuster trades for established stars? Or do you win by developing talent internally and building through the draft? There's no one right answer, but it's a debate that front offices have constantly. Let's talk about Nashville's perspective for a moment, because their motivations matter. Why would the Predators even consider trading Filip Forsberg? He's been the face of their franchise for years. He's beloved by fans, and he's still producing at a high level. What would drive them to move him? The most likely answer is that Nashville is at a crossroads. They're not a true cup contender right now. Despite having talent on the roster, they're in that dangerous middle ground where they're too good to get high draft picks, but not good enough to realistically win a championship.